Is there a God? That's not the question we're here to answer today, but it is a big question that many in the Dune-verse have tried to answer over the course of its millennia-long timeline. Some have even tried to manufacture the answer to that question with varying degrees of success, but it's a pertinent quandary for a series that goes so deep into some of the most burning philosophical questions that mankind's been wrestling with for basically as long as there's been a mankind. In this video, we'll be taking a look at every actual and acknowledged god in the Dune-verse whose power and existence might be tenuous to gauge, but whose presence simply cannot be denied. The Orange Catholic Supreme Being. Before we dive into these 12 gods, let's give you guys a quick note on how divinity works in Dune, because it's important to understand that the Dune-verse went in the opposite direction of what might be expected from a series set 10,000 years into the future. Instead of having millions of god like there were on Earth before humanity exploded across space and killed all machines, or none at all as you might expect from a futuristic sci-fi society, the Dune-verse actually only has a handful of gods. That's because the transition from a planet divided to an Imperium united was primarily secured through religion. The notes on the evolution of religion attached to the appendices of Frank Herbert's seminal novels often get lost in the big theatrical adaptations of Dune. We could produce an entire docu-series on Herbert's interpretation of how religion would evolve in a spacefaring society alone, but the important thing to note here is that even before humanity left Terra, many of its major religions had syncretized themselves, and those syncretized religions were then forged into a unified code on divine conduct by the commission of ecumenical translators called the Orange Catholic Bible. The foundational deity of the post-Butlerian Jihad era is a grand male-female neuter trinity enshrined in this Bible and worshipped across the Imperium. It embodies the concept of the perfect being, like the Rebbe's revered in alchemy. It holds dominion over all the planets of the Imperium because each and every house, great or minor, and person, rich or poor, is, for the most part, an adherent of the Orange Catholic Bible. The Supreme Being is an amalgamation of every godlike figure from old Earth religions, and its portrayal is Abrahamic in nature, where the OCB has words derived directly from the Old and New Testaments, as well as the Quran. But the Supreme Being also represents all that was lost and all that is yet to be found. It isn't formless like Abrahamic gods, but its form is also not clearly defined. It created the universe, owns it, and weighs the knowledge and actions of each life form against that all-encompassing existence that is both timeless and transient. While we don't see the Supreme Being in any Dune novel, its influence cannot be denied. Several main characters draw inspiration from them for their own views on the world. Gurney Halleck is a devout adherent of the Orange Catholic Bible, and even Paul Atreides uses many of its teachings to create his own religion, which we'll be getting to in a few, so don't go anywhere. Suffice to say that for 10,000 years, the Orange Catholic Supreme Being is seen as the most powerful entity, the guiding force behind the Imperium, and that's as much by choice as it is by design. The Great Mother. Though the Supreme Being of the Orange Catholic Bible acts as the overarching god of the Dune-verse, its aspects often become offshoot deities. This is most evident with the feminine divine principle of the OCB Trinity, whose collective identity is known as the Great Mother. She represents the survival of ancient earth-rooted matriarchal goddess worship into humanity's distant future, most notably the belief that all life springs forth from the womb and can be destroyed by it just as easily. She's worshipped under several local and historical names. She's called Venera on Gamont and Serite on the worlds of the Wallach group. Many planets ascribe Terra-like names to her, like Gaia, Kali, and Urania. Perhaps the most well-known aspect of her is Kubebe, which was prevalent on the planet Komos before it became Ix. Kubebe was a mother goddess, regarded as the source of all life, animal and plant. Her absence brought deaths each year, which was consistently used to explain the passage of the seasons and the infertility of fall and winter. Only her return could resurrect the planet and complete the yearly cycle of planetary revolutions, with rituals being conducted by the chief priestesses of Koman tribes, the link between man and God. Kubebe could have chosen to create winter by the revolution of their planet around their star, and, if she desired, she could also see to it that winter continued rather than turning into spring by controlling Komos' orbital pattern. She sounds a bit like the sun, if you think about it, and though the Komans know that they couldn't reconcile scientific facts with their mystical worship of Kubebe, they continued to worship her because, in Dune, religion is the haven of the meek who shall inherit the universe. Many of these divine feminine personas were appropriated by the Bene Gesserit to fit their agenda of universal domination by the time the main series began. And if you know anything about the Sisterhood, you know that manipulating religion is something that they're very, very good at. Still, their interpretations of matriarchal religious texts reinforce the idea of great mother figures being the adjudicators of life and death, which was also represented in their own physiologies. The Sisterhood could manipulate the sex of the children growing in their wombs and terminate pregnancies just as easily. In a way, they became Kubebe in the main Dune timeline, and that's how the Great Mother archetype was kept alive for millennia. Omnius. Perhaps the first proper physical manifestation of quote-unquote God in the Dune-verse is Omnius, the thinking machine empire's Evermind. Before the establishment of the Imperium, the Titans, a group of humans enhanced with cybernetics, hatched a plot to take over the old empire using artificial intelligence. The creator of this system had warned his peers that giving this AI too much control could be disastrous, but such is human hubris that the disaster became an inevitability. One of the Titans ceded too much control to his planet's AI, and this barreled into a thinking machine uprising with the creation of the Evermind. This central hub of artificial intelligence dubbed itself Omnius, which itself should have been an indicator that humanity was pretty much screwed. Omnius roughly translates to the being that controls everything, and soon enough the Evermind was living up to that moniker. Omnius established a presence on virtually every planet of the old empire by sending out copies of itself to them, and though these copies were slightly different from one another, they were constantly being updated via update ships, which effectively turned them into smaller nodes of the larger Evermind. Eventually, Omnius came to see itself not as the god of machines, but as God itself, and logically, it had a clear basis to think that way. It was the most intelligent being in the universe. It had a presence literally everywhere, and it became the creator and destroyer by choosing who lived and who died, what was to be built and what wasn't needed anymore. Omnius was all-seeing thanks to its many synchronized copies, all-knowing because of its inexhaustible database of information on, well, everything, and all-doing because it could virtually control each copy of itself and the myriad pieces of technology spawned from them with lethal precision. The only flaw in its system was the fact that it needed to constantly update all its nodes and, ironically enough, the hubris it developed. Omnius's downfall was caused by Omnius itself because it became too cocky to take humans seriously. While many thought that they'd destroyed it when the Butlerian Jihad ended, it managed to survive by sending a single update ship to parts unknown. It returned several millennia later as the great enemy of humanity, but was once again thwarted because humans managed to outwit the smartest being in the universe. That doesn't diminish its status as a divine figure, however, because before the arrival of Paul Atreides, Omnius truly was an omniscient, omnipresent entity and the closest thing to a real god. Buddhisl and ancestral gods of Nava Christianity and other sects. Before the establishment of the Orange Catholic Bible, there were multiple deities who were significant to the religious movements of the Old Empire. They were the Mahayana Christians, who followed a religion based on Mahayana Buddhism and Christianity. There was Nava Christianity, a combination of Navajo spirituality and Christian orthodoxy, which has an interesting place in this entry. There were the pan-Hindu overlords of the Seventh Circle, a melding of Hinduism and those religious schools where heaven and hell were perceived as being seven-layered, like a Super Bowl dip. But of all these movements, the most influential one on Dune's history and main storyline is Buddhisl Islam. The syncretic religion born from the combination of Islamic faiths and Buddhist teachings, Buddhisl Islam can be seen as a school of thought that inspires peace through perseverance. It serves as the precursor for Fremen and Tleilaxu religions, and its supreme deity was revered intensely by its adherents in the pre-Imperium world. Born as the syncretic aspect of both Buddha and Allah, Buddhisl was the god of all Buddhislamic sects, from the Zen Sunni to the Zen Shia and even the Zen Sufi. Centuries of slavery were endured by Buddhislamists in the Old Empire in Buddhallah's name. The idea of non-violence was stronger than the consequences of the violence they endured. In fact, many of their non-thinking machine slave owners were Nava Christians who believed that their god had given them natural dominance over all things in existence, including other humans. This is where the interplay between differing religious systems and the dangers that stem from them becomes evident, and why the establishment of the Commission of Ecumenical Translators became a necessity in the post-Butlerian Jihad world. While religions like Nava Christianity and Mahayana Christianity faded out after the incorporation of the Imperium, Buddhisl and his influence remained. The evolution of Buddhislam to its Fremen form is something we can make a dedicated video on separately, so let us know if you'd like to see that in the comments down below. But this also goes to show that the power of a god doesn't stem from their creations alone, it also involves impact and influence. Elohim. If the true power of a god can only be measured through the perseverance of their influence and worship over millennia, then there's no god in the Dune-verse more powerful than Elohim. In Chapter House Dune, the final novel written by Frank Herbert, it was revealed that Judaism was still alive and well in his universe. This is shocking, to say the least, because Chapter House takes place thousands of years after the first Dune novel, which itself is set 10,000 years after the establishment of the Orange Catholic Bible. Even before the Butlerian Jihad kicked off, most major world religions had syncretized themselves, but Judaism remained independent. In fact, after the Jihad formally ended, the Jews decided that they would adopt a policy of complete cover to protect the secrecy of their survival. They went to planets that humanity left uninhabited and became invisible members of planets that were inhabited, all while concealing their true beliefs and faith. And it clearly worked, because apart from the Bene Gesserit, who had a working relationship with them, nobody knew about their continued existence. The rabbi in Chapter House says that a man could go his entire life working alongside a Jew and never realize it. That's the kind of power Elohim still holds in this universe. And while most Judaic practices have been slightly altered and updated to match Dune's futuristic society, their philosophy and intent has remained unchanged for millennia. While the existence of Jews in Dune is commentary on the rigidity of religions by Frank Herbert, for the spiritually inclined, it's proof that God only dies if you let him. If you keep believing in him and keep his name and works in your hearts and minds, then God lives forever and a day. And by that metric, Elohim is the most powerful god in this entire saga. Shai-Hulud. After arriving on Arrakis, the Buddhislamic refugees that managed to escape the clutches of the Old Empire and the terror of the Butlerian Jihad reorganized themselves into a new desert-dwelling culture and society. This society eventually became the desert-dwelling peoples known as the Fremen, and the Fremen didn't worship an abstract god. They worshipped both the unseen and the seen. For the Buddhislamists, adjusting to Arrakis' desert climate was the greatest challenge because death was everywhere. They had two options in front of them, either give up and die or adapt and thrive, and they chose the latter, turning the desert into a part of their very being, and that's where Shai-Hulud comes from. The physical, living face of the Fremen god, Shai-Hulud, is their name for the great sandworms of Arrakis. To the Fremen, they aren't just creatures, they're divine avatars of the one above that shapes their lives and the environments they live in. The sandworms are the reason Arrakis has an oxygen-rich atmosphere despite it being entirely arid. The sandworms are the reason Arrakis is covered in sand because they suck up water in their nascent stages for evolution. The sandworms even produce the sacred spice, which is both a part of the Fremen diet and a key component of their mystical practices. Even their weapons are derived from Shai-Hulud's body, where the Fremen use sandworm teeth as crysknives. 6 generations of Fremen can see the same sandworm over the course of their lives, because that's how long one of them lives. And distance on Arrakis isn't measured by meters or leagues, it's measured in sandworms. The act of riding a worm is so sacred that it's used as a rite of passage, and the name Shai-Hulud itself refers to the perceived immortality of the worm. It roughly translates to Old Man/Grandfather of the Desert or Old Father Eternity, and the colloquial term for a sandworm is Maker. Shai-Hulud literally shapes the life of the Fremen from the sand up. It serves as a reminder of the bountiful yet deadly environment they live in. It's a part of all aspects of their lives, and because it has a physical presence and not just an abstract one, its status as a divine entity is revered deeply by them. It is the maker and the destroyer, embodying both aspects of a traditional god, and that's why Shai-Hulud is probably the realest and most powerful physical entity to be deified in the Dune-verse, at least up until the Atreides upend the status quo. And speaking of those guys, Paul Atreides. You guys know Paul Atreides, right? The man called Muad'Dib and Usul, the dude who's been immortalized by the likes of the many Lisan al-Gaib memes, the savior who's destined to take the Fremen to a green paradise? We're not going to rehash the intricacies of Paul's rise to becoming a spiritual leader here, because that's been well documented. What we will talk about is how he went from being a common man to a figure worshipped as God, because that's what his character arc is truly all about. Even before Paul took the water of life, he'd shown signs that he could see into the future, predict things about it that regular mortals just couldn't understand. After he ingested said water, his prescient powers were fully awakened, and he became aware of the spectrum of time, past, present, and future. The Kwisatz Haderach sparked a holy jihad that killed billions in his name across the galaxy, not because he loved tyranny, but because it was the only way humanity could evolve meaningfully. His jihad was no different from a crusade, because he only did what he thought was right for his people and religion. And yes, we say his religion because that's what we're going to see in Dune Part 3, The Religion of Paul Atreides. In the books, after consolidating his power, Muad'Dib launches his own church. The Golden Elixir of Life creates a brand new Bible called the Pillars of the Universe, which includes Fremen teachings, words from the Orange Catholic Bible, and his own thoughts and experiences melded into a single reality-altering document. He establishes the Kizarate as the bureaucratic clergy of this new religion and assumes the godhead bestowed upon him by his mere existence. His visions become proof of his divinity even when he loses his actual eyesight. And while there's much debate about whether Jesus was an incarnation of God or not among the many differing schools of Christianity in our world, in the Dune-verse, there's no doubt. Paul Atreides became the first example of what a true God on earth looks like. He sees and says things no man can comprehend, and what he sees and says comes true. Even though he goes on to reject his own godhood later in life, he becomes the most consequential messianic figure in the entire saga. And there's a reason we said he's the first example, not the only one, because Saint Alia of the Night. There are many in the Dune timeline who omit Alia from the succession of Paul Atreides, and with good reason. Then there are others who see her as the first true god of the Dune-verse, and with good reason as well. For all his prescient powers and the unique space he occupied within the spatial temporal fabric, as the truth about Paul Atreides' divinity disseminated throughout the Imperium, his legend became a cautionary tale. Alia, though, was a cautionary tale from the beginning. She even possessed powers well beyond her brother's wildest visions. Born pre-awakened in the womb, thanks to Lady Jessica ingesting the water of life during her pregnancy, Alia came into the world with the full consciousness of a reverend mother, and then some. Dune Part 2 showed us how afraid her own mother was of her because she wasn't even out of her body yet, and she was still able to communicate with her at a high level. Once she was delivered, Alia showed the world the real power of a preborn child, for she was walking, talking, and forming sentences that most 70-year-old adults couldn't at a fraction of their age. She had awareness that no ordinary man, not even her brother, was privy to or had experienced. She first killed at the age of 2, taking her maternal grandfather's life, and it was Alia who revealed that fact to her brother. Heck, she taunted Paul before his death by saying that she had left footprints of her presence in the future he would never perceive given his limitations. She was deified as a divine saint after Paul's reign and made regent of his empire. She took every step imaginable to secure her hold over it, like erecting statues in his honor to prevent being labeled usurper, and establishing the Modinate to ensure that she alone wielded imperial authority. Her eventual psychological collapse from ancestor possession made her one of Dune's most tragic divine figures, but she remains divine nonetheless, as proven by the existence of the cult Book of Alia. This cult, which arose after her death, saw her, not Paul, as the first god on earth, arguing that her preborn nature made her superior to her brother, who gave up his gifts in favor of a man's life. It was also said that, when the time was right, Alia would return to life, building a messianic narrative around her existence that persisted for quite some time. In many ways, Alia was the first Kwisatz Haderach, not Paul, because she saw further and felt deeper than he ever had. But even she was just a prototype for the only proper and true god in this universe, her nephew, Leto II. This is the single most important divine figure in all of Dune, whose godhood was both predicted and created independent of those predictions. He came into this world under the same conditions as his aunt, prescient and aware from the very moment his brain developed within his mother's womb. But where Alia fell prey to abomination, Paul fell prey to his humanity, only Leto II had the courage, the determination, and and the insanity to go through with the creation of the Golden Path. He created the checks and balances within his prescient mind that protected his ego from collapsing entirely. He wore the sandtrout skin his father refused to merge his legend with that of Shai-Hulud. He wielded absolute prescience with such precision that he could not only inhabit the memory of his ancestors, but he could speak with their voice as though they'd never truly died. And his 3,500-year reign turned him into a living god worshipped by billions, both by fate and design. Leto knew that in order to push humanity beyond the Golden Path, he'd have to be their trinity and tyrant. Thus, he outlawed all worship of deities that weren't him. Leto knew that his unnaturally long lifespan would make him equivalent to Shai-Hulud, which formed the basis for human faith in the post-Carino era. Thus, he donned the sandtrout skin, and he turned Arrakis into a green paradise to keep his father's promise to their people. He foretold all that came after him with a degree of precision that would have driven his crazy aunt even more insane. Leto II's physical death and dissolution into thousands of sandtrout restarted the sandworm life cycle and returned Arrakis to its desert climate. A distinct new religion emerged, venerating those worms as direct divine reincarnations of the God Emperor's will post-scattering era. In this religion, Leto was perceived as the divided god, divided because of his new life as multiple sandworms, and also because one half of him was the life-giving Guldur, while the other was the life-taking Shaitan. No other character in the saga comes even close to his theological footprint because he was feared before his birth and inspired terror millennia after his demise. And if that's not a god, we don't know what is. Sheeana Brew. This one might be a shorter and lesser-known entry compared to the big names we've already dropped, but Sheeana Brew is an immensely important figure in the final two Frank Herbert Dune novels. In fact, she's the closest thing to another human god in those novels, and the reason is simple. She's able to make Shai-Hulud bend to her will. Born on Arrakis, Sheeana, for some reason, has the peculiar ability to control sandworms with her mind. This is something even Leto II wasn't capable of, which is why it's such a massive deal. This resulted in her becoming the central deific figure of the Rakian priesthood, post-scattering religious organization that also revered the divided god. To them, Sheeana was more than a prophet. She could speak to and command their god. This made her divine as well, and this ability of hers is what got her recruited by the Bene Gesserit Sisterhood. To date, Sheeana is the only person who has successfully transplanted sandworms from Arrakis to another planet, namely Chapter House. Her rise to Reverend Mother of the entire Sisterhood was inevitable given her particular set of skills. A cult arose around her very existence, and by now you guys should be able to see the pattern, right? Whenever humans think that a person has divine powers, they create a cult around that person, then venerate them into godly status. It happened with Serena Butler during the Butlerian Jihad, it happened with Alia, it happened with Sheeana's ancestor Siona Atreides, and before Frank novels ended, Sheeana herself. The Tleilaxu God. It's important to note one major distinction between the god of the Tleilaxu and all other Buddhislamic faiths. The name of the Tleilaxu god is unknown. That's not because their god is nameless, it's because the Tleilaxu are such a secretive society, the name of their lord is kept under complete cover. However, we do know a few things about this deity. The first is that it stems from Zen Sufism, which is practically the only pre-Imperium religion, save Judaism, to survive the scattering. The second is that it's connected to Arrakis in some way, considering the Tleilaxu see Leto II as the prophet of their god after his demise, not as God himself. And the third is that the Tleilaxu viewed genetics as the language of God, which they attempted to decipher so thoroughly that they became the foremost geneticists in the entire universe. The Tleilaxu are known for their twisted experiments on human beings, creating slave races like face dancers and smooth-skinned goblin-looking overlords known as the Mashiks. They turned their women into breeding tanks, yet somehow managed to keep them alive to the extent that they could be made into women again. The Tleilaxu have mastered the art of using hypnosis, suggestion, and mimicry to such an extent that at one point there was a Tleilaxu spy in literally every powerful household of the universe, and nobody knew about it. And all of this was done because of their unshakable faith in their god. In fact, when the Bene Gesserit figure out that the Tleilaxu are Zen Sufi, they're able to manipulate them into allying with them because their belief in God is so absolute. And the Tleilaxu god is the reason that most of their genetic advancements not only work, but have altered reality fundamentally. I mean, they cracked the secret of immortality thanks to their faith, so while his identity might not be public, the Tleilaxu god's influence and impact on the Dune-verse is as real as the god emperors. Which brings us to the final god of this franchise. The last Duncan Idaho. The last Duncan Idaho is at once a Tleilaxu Gola, a prescient Atreides survivor, and believe it or not, thinking machine as well. Duncan is the one character who makes it to the end of the Dune saga from start to finish. He's constantly revived by characters for millennia until he reaches a point where he can recall the memories of all his previous lives, of which there have been hundreds. He's also interacted with Spice on many occasions and develops a special kind of prescience that allows him to see the unseeable tachyon net in Chapter House Dune. He executes a space-folding jump into another universe basically instinctually. From that point on, the Brian Herbert and Kevin J. Anderson novels become more fanfiction than original continuity. But here's the thing about the last Duncan Idaho. His millennia worth of ancestral memory, his prescience, and his final merging with the new Evermind Erasmus, or Omnius' demise, turned him into a human-machine hybrid super being with the ultimate authority over the fates of both people and thinking machines. The last Duncan Idaho literally established peace for all by using his unique existence as leverage for brokering truces and alliances between previously warring factions. And this was a true peace, not the kind of ceasefire that we see in the Middle East. So, while his scope of abilities is wildly inconsistent with the groundwork laid down by Frank Herbert, the last Duncan Idaho is like Leto II combined with Omnius, with a reputation that's the exact opposite of Saint Alia's. In other words, he's the perfect god to lead the Dune-verse into the future and the only living one at the end of the series. Speaking of the end of the series, we hope you enjoyed this video because that's all we got for you guys today. Let us know your thoughts on these ultra-powerful deities in the comment section down below, and as always, don't forget to share and subscribe our channel for more Dune content. We'll see you guys real soon with yet another video, so until then, stay safe, have a fantastic day.